Yes, I did actually. She's a practical person. She's a down-to-earth person. She's very, very smart, very astute, and she knows her craft.
It's one of the most celebrated sci-fi films ever made, a masterpiece of dystopian vision that redefined a genre and still influences filmmakers today. Blade Runner isn't just a movie, it's a cultural landmark, a haunting, rain-soaked exploration of what it means to be human. At its core is Harrison Ford's iconic performance as Rick Deckard, the weary Blade Runner hunting rogue androids through the neon-drenched streets of 2019 Los Angeles. His portrayal is a cornerstone of cinema, a perfect mix of hard-boiled detective and existential hero. But behind that legendary performance lies a complicated story. For over 40 years, rumors have swirled around the film's notoriously troubled production, a shoot so grueling and full of conflict that it left scars on almost everyone involved. Harrison Ford, an actor known for his professionalism, has often spoken about the film with a distinct coldness, a quiet frustration that hinted at something deeper. It was supposed to be a sci-fi masterpiece. For him, it became an experience he was glad to leave behind. For decades, the whispers were just rumors, cold stares on set, awkward silences between takes, a tension so thick you could feel it in the final film. Now, separating fact from 40 years of Hollywood lore, the story of the on-set clashes and a so-called hate scene reveals why Harrison Ford had such a miserable time making the 1982 classic. And it wasn't just the endless rain or the demanding director. A huge part of his frustration, the one that lingered for decades, centered on one person, his leading lady, Sean Young. To understand the conflict that would define Harrison Ford's experience on Blade Runner, you have to go back to the early 80s. Hollywood was changing, and Harrison Ford was on top of the world. He was Han Solo. He was Indiana Jones. By any measure, he was one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. He'd built a reputation as a serious, devoted craftsman, a pro who showed up, knew his lines, and got the job done. He was used to working with directors like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, who were collaborative and stood right beside him, guiding the performance. Then came director Ridley Scott. Scott was a visionary, fresh off the massive success of Alien. Coming from the world of commercials, the British director had an unparalleled visual eye. He didn't just shoot a script, he painted with light and shadow. He saw Blade Runner, based on Philip K. Dick's novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Not as a sci-fi action flick, but as a brooding, atmospheric film noir set in the future. His approach was meticulous, obsessive, and uncompromising. He was a perfectionist in a town that ran on tight schedules and budgets. This difference in style was the first crack in the foundation. Scott, wanting total control over the film's complex visuals, often directed from a video playback booth far from the actors. For Ford, this was a huge problem. He felt disconnected, like he was performing for cameras without a director to guide him. He wanted to collaborate, but instead felt isolated from a director who seemed more interested in the frame than the actor in it. The set itself was a pressure cooker. The film was shot almost entirely at night for 50 grueling nights, under constant manufactured rain that left everyone perpetually drenched and cold. The atmosphere was testy and exhausted. Scott's perfectionism led to endless takes, pushing the film over budget and behind schedule. This brought immense pressure from the financial backers, who were expecting a Star Wars-style blockbuster and were getting slow, atmospheric footage they didn't understand. The tension between Scott and his American crew became legendary. After, Scott told a British newspaper he preferred working with compliant British crews. The American crew members fired back by wearing T-shirts on set that read, "Yes, Governor, my ass." It was a set defined by conflict, a battle between a headstrong director, a frustrated crew, and nervous producers. And into this storm walked Sean Young. She was a relative newcomer, cast as Rachel, the beautiful replicant who discovers her entire life is a lie. The on-screen chemistry between her and Ford's Deckard was supposed to be the emotional core of the film, a tragic love story that would blur the lines between human and machine. But from the very beginning, something was off. The connection wasn't there. Instead of chemistry, there was a void. Instead of a partnership, there was a growing, icy distance. The friction between Harrison Ford, the consummate professional, and Sean Young, the unpredictable newcomer, would soon become the second and far more personal war being waged on the set of Blade Runner. The friction between Harrison Ford and Sean Young wasn't a single dramatic blow-up. It was a slow burn of clashing personalities and different approaches to acting, all trapped in a high-stress environment. Ford, a former carpenter, brought a workmanlike, no-nonsense ethic to his roles. He had very little patience for what he saw as unprofessionalism or drama. Sources from the set and later retrospectives suggest Young was seen by some as less experienced and at times unpredictable. Whether this was a fair assessment or simply a young actress navigating a difficult male-dominated set is a matter of perspective. What's clear is that her approach didn't click with Ford's. He was all business, and the difference created a chasm between them. When the cameras stopped rolling, so did any attempt at a connection. There was no friendly banter, no common ground. Crew members picked up on the tension, giving the two stars a wide berth between takes. This off-screen hostility started to bleed into their performances. The love story between Deckard and Rachel was supposed to be tense, but the tension was meant to be about a man falling for a machine, not two actors who reportedly couldn't stand each other. The lines blurred. Was the audience seeing Deckard's aggressive confusion or Harrison Ford's real-life frustration? Was that Rachel's programmed fear or Sean Young's genuine discomfort? The breaking point became the filming of the love scene. In the script, it's a pivotal, aggressive moment where Deckard forces Rachel to admit her feelings. On set, it became something else entirely. The cold, forced nature of the interaction earned it a notorious nickname in the film's lore: the hate scene. It was reportedly an awkward, uncomfortable shoot. Ford, already frustrated with the production, felt the whole dynamic was wrong. Years later, Sean Young offered her own explosive explanation for the scene's tone. She has alleged that director Ridley Scott made romantic advances toward her, which she rebuffed. According to Young, Scott then started dating actress Joanna Cassidy, who played the replicant Zora, and the aggressive direction of the love scene was his way of getting back at her. She felt it was a punishment, a deliberate act of on-set revenge. This accusation, which Scott has never publicly addressed, adds a deeply troubling layer to the environment. It paints a picture of a young actress caught between a co-star she couldn't connect with and a director she claims was punishing her. The hate scene wasn't just a difficult day at work. It was the culmination of multiple fractures on set, a collision of personal friction and alleged directorial retribution that made a miserable production even worse. The dynamic with Sean Young was a major source of Harrison Ford's frustration, but it was far from the only battle he was fighting. The entire production was a multi-front war. His issues went far beyond his co-star, extending to creative disputes with the director and outright battles with the studio. One of the biggest arguments was about Deckard himself. Ridley Scott was adamant that Deckard was a replicant, a machine hunting his own kind, an idea he would later hint at in his director's and final cuts. Ford absolutely hated this idea. He argued that if Deckard was a replicant, the story lost its emotional core. For Ford, the whole point was about a human man losing his humanity by doing an inhuman job. This wasn't a minor plot disagreement, it was a fundamental clash over the soul of the film. The argument was so persistent that Denis Villeneuve, director of the sequel Blade Runner 2049, noted that even in 2017, putting Ford and Scott in the same room would lead to them loudly arguing about it. Then there was the voiceover. After early test screenings confused audiences, the studio panicked. They demanded a voiceover narration be added to explain the plot, a move that went against everything Scott and Ford wanted. Ford was appalled. He felt the narration was poorly written and condescending. He and Scott had already worked to weave that information into the scenes, only for the studio to force them to add the clumsy narration back in. Ford was contractually obligated to record it and called the experience a nightmare. He was forced into a studio to read lines he despised. He has said he read them flatly, without any enthusiasm, hoping they'd be unusable. The studio used them anyway. "I was obliged to work for these clowns," he said years later, the bitterness still obvious. The experience cemented his view that he was fighting a losing battle against executives who didn't get the film. As if that wasn't enough, the studio also demanded a new, happy ending. Scott's original ending was ambiguous and dark. The studio, desperate for a hit, tacked on footage of Deckard and Rachel driving through a sunny forest. Outtake shots, ironically, from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. The new ending was jarring and completely out of place. Ford hated it. When Blade Runner was released in June 1982, it was a box office disappointment, steamrolled by E.T. the Extraterrestrial. For Ford, the film's failure was the final insult. He'd endured the night shoots and the rain. He'd clashed with his director. He'd been forced to record a joke of a voiceover, and he'd been stuck in a silent, icy feud with a co-star. Now all that misery had resulted in a commercial flop. For decades, the story of the Blade Runner set was mostly insider gossip and carefully worded interviews. Ford, a famously private star, rarely spoke of the film with any warmth, but he never publicly dragged his co-star. He'd talk about the rain, the voiceover, and Ridley Scott, but the feud with Sean Young remained a well-kept Hollywood secret. Then, as he entered his 80s, something shifted. In more recent interviews, Ford, in his typical blunt, understated way, finally confirmed what had been rumored for 40 years. Working with Sean Young was not a good experience. He didn't offer a dramatic tell-all. Instead, he acknowledged the truth with a quiet finality. He admitted they didn't find any common ground, and that when the camera stopped, the connection stopped with it. He confirmed the rumors of tension were true, calling the filming of their scenes an unpleasant experience. This quiet confirmation was monumental. It recontextualized everything. His past coldness toward the film suddenly had a new focus. His frustration wasn't just about a difficult shoot. It was tied directly to the emotional toll of a failed creative partnership. What's most striking is his restraint. He doesn't trash Young, and has even acknowledged the immense pressure they were both under. Yet, his words leave no doubt. The on-set relationship was a profoundly negative part of the experience for him. In a moment of telling wit, when asked about the chemistry that many fans now see in their tense on-screen dynamic, Ford quipped, "People call it chemistry. I call it survival. We got through it, but I never wanted to go back there." That one sentence sums it all up. For him, it wasn't art. It was endurance. It wasn't a creative dance. It was a long, hard slog. His own words finally confirmed a central truth. A significant part of his misery on Blade Runner was his relationship with his leading lady. The troubled production of Blade Runner cast a long shadow, but in very different ways. For Harrison Ford, it was a painful memory on a road that led to decades of superstardom. He's still a Hollywood legend, his legacy secure. For him, Blade Runner is a strange anomaly, a film he had a miserable time making that, against all odds, became a classic. He said he enjoyed making the sequel, Blade Runner 2049, Far more, partly because it wasn't raining and it wasn't night all the time. For Sean Young, the aftermath was far more damaging. After Blade Runner, she struggled in Hollywood, becoming entangled in public controversies that earned her a reputation for being difficult. She has been outspoken for years, claiming she was effectively blacklisted by powerful men. Her brief 30-second CGI appearance in Blade Runner 2049 felt to her like a final insult. She called the cameo full of shit, stating that the producers knew the audience would be upset if she wasn't in it at all. So they paid her for a tiny part and made her sign a non-disclosure agreement to keep her from complaining publicly. And yet, there's a final, fascinating irony to this story. Over the past 40 years, Blade Runner has been re-edited and re-evaluated. The hated voiceover is gone. The tacked-on happy ending is gone. The film, once a flop, is now seen as a masterpiece. Part of what makes it so enduring is that very tension between Deckard and Rachel. Their scenes are electric with danger, mistrust, and a desperate, fragile connection. The real-life coldness between the actors, the discomfort and frustration, it all translated to the screen in a way no one could have planned. The lack of genuine warmth made their tragic relationship feel even more authentic. Their inability to connect off-screen became the very thing that made their on-screen story so unforgettable. The friction that caused Harrison Ford so much frustration may have been the secret ingredient that helped immortalize the film. The story of Blade Runner's production is one of Hollywood's most fascinating legends. What are your thoughts on how the on-set tension affected the final film? Does knowing about the issues between Harrison Ford and Sean Young change how you see their performances? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoy The Secret, histories of your favorite films, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories from behind the Hollywood curtain. In the end, Blade Runner is both a monument to visionary filmmaking and a cautionary tale about the human cost of creating art. It's a film that survived a grueling shoot, studio interference, and the bitter conflict between its stars to become a legend. Harrison Ford's frustrating experience is now a permanent part of that legend, a reminder that even masterpieces can be born from misery. The rain-soaked world of Blade Runner is unforgettable, not despite the turmoil behind its creation, but perhaps in some strange way because of it.